Hi, this is Mehdi,
Hey, this is Fran.
and this is Total Tactics Football. Fran, 8-2. Do we need to say more?
No, it was a lot worse than we expected with our predictions. We both expected Bayern to win this just because we have actually watched Barcelona and Bayern, from the post-lockdown break. And we can see that this Barca side really does struggle playing, high-intensity football. And they need their young players like Puig and Fati or even Dembele to play. And what we saw was just a reversion from Kike Setien to play the standard players, the veteran players that aren't going to do anything versus one of the most intense physical sides in world football in Bayern.
Well, yeah, we saw that in the game. Let's first touch up on Setien's lineup. I was very disappointed because it was very reserved, and it was a setup of someone who doesn't have confidence in his players.
No, I agree. So he opted for a 4-4-2. Initially, I thought he would play, if even he was to opt for four midfielders to at least play, maybe push so that you actually have someone who can play in the 4-4-2 diamond and someone who could maybe link up the ball with at least Messi and Suarez if you're going to try for that and not play Griezmann, for example. But instead, he
Yeah.
played Vidal and kind of reverted to a 4-4-2 where, Vidal and Sergio Roberto are left CMs and RCMs. And it just doesn't work. Vidal is not a winger. He's not able to keep the ball on a flank. Sergio Roberto the same. Very hard for him to pass out of the back. And ultimately, you create a very narrow team that allows for Bayern to abuse you, in terms of width and with their wingers and also their fullbacks. It's not even like they're able to dominate the midfield, which is what you'd expect, when you play four midfielders.
Exactly, and we saw from the beginning of the game, they like to sit deep, and they were looking to go and break on the counter,
Yep.
which is something that is very uncharacteristic of Barcelona. It's a shame because this is a prestigious side, and they've been playing dominant possession football for a long time, and you could see today that they were the clear underdogs. In the beginning of the game, I will say I did feel like, if had Barcelona taken a few of those chances, maybe they had like some faster players up front, the game could have had a little different outcome. But after the 10, 15 minutes, a little bit of disturbance, Bayern seemed to settle in.
Well, that's the thing too, right? In this sort of post-lockdown break, we've seen teams take some time to gear up. We've looked at several games across the league. Sometimes the first 10, 15 minutes, you see uncharacteristic mistakes from players and from teams when they're unorganized at the back. And that's exactly what happened when Alaba scored that own goal. Ultimately, the game wasn't really about, specific individual mistakes. Both keepers performed fantastically. And for a team to ultimately score 8 goals against you shows just the vast difference in quality in both sides. And it's shocking because to go through both halves and to really lose convincingly 4-1 also tells you that Setien really had no solutions and not even attempted to really go for something different. It was odd that he really just tried to go for that Griezmann substitution and just revert to what was, basically a static lineup because the way they've played versus teams in La Liga, they've been very slow and the goals have sort of come out of nothing, exactly like Suarez's goal. But you can't rely on that when a team like Bayern have, 20, 30, 40 chances over the course of one match.
I agree with you absolutely, and this is a club that needs to look at a lot of different aspects of this club. They look at the team. They need to look at the board. There's a lot of restructuring that needs to be done, and it's such a shame because I feel had Setien been a bit more brave, had he gambled, because we know that possibly he's going to get sacked tomorrow, most definitely now, and he wasn't favored. He had to play something to save himself, and it's someone who doesn't have the courage. He doesn't have the squad on his side. He doesn't have the belief in his own, tactics. He's been playing for the 4-3 diamond. We were talking about like the 4-3-1-2, and somewhat worked for them. It worked against Napoli, and I know Bayern Munich is such an elite team compared to Napoli, but you would try to at least suggest the team would go with what they believe in and what they know they can do. You can't expect a Barcelona side to play like Atletico Madrid, so deep into the field. The players aren't made for that. They're not used to this. Yes, they looked good for a little bit, but then we saw how the game opened up. And especially on that left-hand side, where we had Gnabry, Perisic, Alfonso Davies constantly rotating and causing havoc. How did you feel about the Bayern Munich setup and the way Flick's side approached this game?
Yeah, no, I mean, as you mentioned, after that first 10, 15 minutes of trouble, Bayern eased into the game. It all comes down to the fact that these players are constantly dynamically moving in positions, something we mentioned in the preview. They're a very fluid side, and they overload the flanks perfectly. But something that I noticed that was quite often done, because, we did mention that Barcelona has a weak point in terms of being exposed through their kind of right flank with Semedo and Piqué there, is
Yeah,
that Kimmich would always look for an over-the-top ball, or even any of the two players in the double pivot, where Thiago and Goretzka usually alternating their positions, would always look for an over-the-top ball to the left, and that actually helps keep Barcelona very, very far pushed back. And yes, that allows for them to counterattack, but ultimately what Bayern do over the course of a game is choke you out. They suffocate you. They play that high line. Yes, you have a few chances, but ultimately they have more, and that's what it's about for Flick's style of football. It's very physically intensive, and just the amount of times that they were kind of taking these one-on-ones in a sense with the Barcelona defense. You can see Muller and Lewandowski going for these kind of headed balls, lofted balls, and trying to create
yeah.
plays. And obviously that leads to that Muller goal, which is fantastic. But the amount of times, it was almost like they were playing volleyball.
Agreed. It's just like as if it was a training ground game for them. They weren't afraid that, oh, okay, they conceded an own goal. This is maybe the difference between this Bayern side. Is like I feel Flick has also applied this mentality to this side that they feel like they can actually go and win. We saw it against Chelsea where they conceded a goal and he was absolutely losing his mind. And this is a side that was scored over 7 goals on aggregate, and it's impressive. And I feel that maybe that's what a manager with confidence and belief does to the players too. Like you give them the support, you give them the confidence that they know what they can do. It's like they believe in their own abilities, and you see that with Muller. Like a player who's been sort of out of the German side, it looked like he was probably going to into a decline, and he brought him back, gave him the confidence, put him in a position where we know he works, and wow, he's causing havoc. He's playing as a second striker. He's on the right flank. He's on the left flank. He's 30 some years old, giving the defense and the defensive mid so much trouble. And that comes from the system, like you mentioned. They all work together. It's a unit that applied. I know that they were quite forward. There's a lot of space that was exposed, but they knew what they had to do in the offense, and they did it. And that's the scoreline doesn't lie. Yeah, you can push it up one or two down. You can say Barcelona was like, but in the end of the day, the fact is the game ended 8-2.
Ultimately, I think we've seen a kind of morph in the Spanish league where these elite sides that can press very high and press very well at all areas of the pitch really choke out the elite Spanish teams. We saw that with Real Madrid versus City. Ultimately, I think that was also a case of Ramos being a miss, but also just look at the fact that Barcelona, just for a team that is so well regarded for possession, they can't pass out of the back. I mean, that second goal was indicative of the fact that they couldn't. Sergio Roberto misplaces a pass. Nabri's overload allows Perisic to score, and that's the problem, right? So Barcelona can't distribute out through a short pass because they ultimately feel like they get choked in regardless, and that leads to an easy Bayern recovery and ultimately a chance. But if they kick the ball forwards, then someone in the midfield in Bayern is allowed to recover the ball and just push it all the way back into Barcelona's box. And I think that's another issue with playing these two midfielders out on the wing. You need to at least target specific areas, and I think try to overload Bayern in a certain way. Playing a very static formation with players who are aged and veteran just ultimately leaves you to losing. And this Bayern side can go on for years because the makeup of the team outside of Muller and Lewandowski are all young players who have unique talents. And that's something we've seen in football too, where, coaches like Klopp love to use specific players and isolate their unique traits. So you see Trent performing so well in Liverpool. The same thing can be said about Alphonso Davies. He's allowed to have that free roaming presence and realistically be Bayern's left winger at times. Perisic kind of holds the line for him, and Davies goes on the overlap, and we saw exactly what happened when he, left Semedo for dead.
Well, absolutely. It's been an incredible year for Bayern Munich. They looked really, really iffy going into the start of the season. Kovac got sacked and Flick came in, and no one really expected him to stay on. He was brought in as an interim manager with the eyes they had set for apparently Ten Hag. but he's done so well. He's instilled this mentality that I mentioned before. They brought this confidence in players. He's using some players who to do the simplest of tasks, and again, unleashing Alfonso Davies, and in this modern day left back, left winger position, and you're bringing Alaba into a more deeper role, but still giving him the license to create those chances from the defense. He has literally taken this Bayern side and utilizing it to its max. It's about the momentum as well. They've been on a roll in the league. They came back, they won the league. In the Champions League, they destroyed Chelsea.